عزف الساكسفون وموسيقى الجاز والجهاد والخطاب التضامني وفلسطين المحتلة والهوية، ما العلاقة بينها؟ الهوية اليهودية من الداخل. معكم زينب الصفار، تابعونا. هو حفيد قائد بارز سابق في منظمة الإرغون اليهودية اليمينية المتطرفة وجندي إسرائيلي سابق، ملحن وعازف الجاز وروائي وناشط سياسي وكاتب. إنه جلعاد أتسمون. كتاباته أثارت جدلاً كبيراً لكونها انطلقت من يهودي ولد في إسرائيل وهاجر منها نهائياً بملء إرادته، ثائراً على ممارسات المحتل الإسرائيلي. نتيجة انتقاداته للهوية اليهودية واليهودية بشكل عام والصهيونية بشكل خاص، اتهم بمعاداة السامية. في كتابه الأخير من هو المتسكع، أثار أتزمون عاصفة من الآراء، حيث وصف أستاذ العلوم السياسية في جامعة شيكاغو البروفيسور جون ميرشايمر مقاربته بالمذهلة والمستفزة. وقال عنه الكاتب والناشط الثائر المناهض للإمبريالية جيمس بطرس إن جلعاد لديه الشجاعة التي يفتقدها الكثير من المثقفين الغربيين لقول الحقيقة المتعلقة بسياسة الهوية اليهودية. بينما أسف الموسيقي الأمريكي ريتشارد سيغل للهجوم الذي يتعرض له أتزمون، ومن ضمنه الهجوم الذي انطلق من أطراف غير متوقعة وجميع من يعنيهم الأمر، وهو يدعو إلى المزيد من التحليل العميق والاحترام المتبادل. كتاب وكاتب يكشف حقيقة إسرائيل من الداخل ويجعلنا نفهم طبيعة الصراع معها. Mr. Gilad Atzmon, welcome to Al Mayadeen TV.
I'm very happy to have you in my house.
We're happy to have you too. Yes, in your book, The Wandering Who, a study of Jewish identity politics, you say in the foreword, and I'm quoting you here, that your grandfather, he was a former commander in the right-wing Irgun terror organization. He had, I must admit, a tremendous influence on me in my early days. Now, what changed this tremendous influence into tremendous indifference, let's say, and antagonism with the ideas of your grandfather?
I was raised to believe that there is really something unique about Israel, about the Jewish state. Mm-hmm. I was raised to believe that we are a new breed, we are a new kind of productive, authentic, genuine, because the whole idea of Zionism was to bring a new Jew to the world, not a moneylender, not a banker. This is Zionism. This is not me presenting Jews as such. Jews that are connected to the land, and I was sure that I would become a farmer. I was always, and I'm still, obsessed with work, being productive. So in a way, I'm very consistent with my Israeli patriotic upbringing. However, at a certain stage, I realized that everything I had, mm-hmm. everything I possessed, mm-hmm. was on the expense of someone else, of the Palestinians.
How did you realize this?
Lebanon war was a very big shock for me, because this was the first time where I saw Israeli army, how brutal it could be. I realized that as much as we wanted to believe or presented Israel, or Israel was presented to itself as a humanist military force, the IDF. In the early stages of the war, just seeing Israeli soldiers, I'm saying it for the first time, it probably would shock a lot of people. Israeli soldiers taking pictures on Syrian tanks along together with Syrian dead bodies.
How was your affair with Israel and Zionism over?
Um, I saw quite a few devastating incidents in '82, and beside the entire war was nothing but the Israeli aggression. We all remember how many thousand Lebanese lost their life. I was in the Air Force. I saw footage of Israeli airplane footage of Israeli pilots bringing down houses, neighborhoods. But I think that the most critical event for me was my visit to Ansar in '84. Ansar was basically a concentration camp, not very different from Dachau or Guantanamo Bay. It was a concentration camp for people who are regarded as political enemies. There were no charges pressed against any of the prisoners. Thousands of them, every Lebanese summer, 44, 46 degrees. They're all surrounded by barbed wires. I was standing there
What did you
in
do
uniform.
there?
I was actually at the time in the Air Force military band, and we came to give a concert, and
To entertain the Israeli
to entertain the
soldiers.
Israelis, so they can continue to
To do their job.
to do the job, kind of with a smile on their face. What I saw we were taken to a short, a kind of tourist scenery trip in the camp, and at a certain stage we arrived at a flat land, looked like a football pitch to me, and we were surrounded with cubes, like 12 or 18 kind of concrete cubes, very small, 1 meter 20 long, maybe 1 meter high. And I asked the commander what were they. I thought that putting dogs in such weather, in such constructions, would be lethal. And he told me these are not for dogs. These were our solitary confinements.
For the detainees.
For detainees, you put a Palestinian in one of those, within 12 hours, he becomes a Zionist. After all the Holocaust Shoah indoctrination, it became very clear to me that in that situation, I was the Nazi in uniform, and the Palestinians were the Jews. And it was just before I finished my compulsory duty, and it was already clear to me then and there that I will have to leave Israel unless something changes. There was no room for me to be part of it.
So this was then when you left Israel, and it was the same time when you denounced your Israeli affiliation.
It still took me 10 years to leave Israel completely. In '94, at the peak of the Oslo Accords or fantasy, this is where I realized that it is a lost battle. When I saw what were the fruits of this peace enthusiasm within the Israeli society, they basically pushed the Palestinians to the corner. They told them, listen man, forget about returning to your land, forget about that, forget about all of it. I realized that even if there is peace, even if it would have been a success, I really didn't want to be part of it. By then I realized that I was living on Palestinian land, that I enjoy my Western ideal life on the expense of millions of refugees. I didn't want to be part of it, and I left then.
You said in one of your articles, and actually in your book too, that as you were living there in occupied Palestine, the Palestinians were invisible to you. What does that mean?
As a young, definitely. This is pretty shocking, but
How were they invisible in this sense?
they're as invisible as 1.5 million Iraqis. That Iraqis are invisible to the vast majority of English people who are complicit in a war in Iraq. I think that part of the culture, supremacist culture that I was part of, and we in the West are complicit in a very similar culture, you don't see the victims of your own oppression. I saw them in the old city of Jerusalem. They were fixing my dad's car. There was a wonderful woman who cooked for me every day, but I didn't know much about her, and I didn't know much about the gardener. And the Palestinian would come to work in the supermarket at 7 o'clock in the morning. They would disappear. We never asked ourselves why. You know, when I was kid, every too often my dad would wake us all and say, oh, there was a terror attack in the Lebanese border, or the other time they would come from the beach. And we always saw it as a continuation of anti-Jewish moronic or sinister behavior. We never asked ourselves what was going on. We never understood that these people were actually refugees who were fighting to go back to the land that belongs to them and didn't belong to me and didn't belong to my parents. I didn't understand it. It took me many years to understand, I admit.
So, what did this utter support of the Palestinians actually cost Gilad Atzmon?
It is more than obvious that there are more than a few people who are extremely unhappy with my views. Zionist, obviously. I just heard Alan Dershowitz, notorious
He attacked you.
Yeah, he really doesn't like me. Actually, I'm very happy with.
And he attacked the people who wrote something about your book.
Yeah,
like
for sure, that are much more superior to him intellectually and academically. I defined new terms, which you want me to talk about.
No, we're going to get back to define these terms, but we have to stop now for a short break. Short break, and we'll be back. Stay tuned.